Hey, Pastor, doesn't science disprove the Bible?
Isn't Genesis just a fairy tale?
Is God for real? Did he really create everything in 6 literal days?
Didn't God just use the Big Bang?
Why is there death and suffering? Really believe the Bible?
Didn't man evolve from apes?
For answers to these questions and more, stand by for Believing the Bible.
Welcome to Believing the Bible. This is Scott Lane with Terry Reed, Dr. Carl Williams, and our producer Ed Salzwedel, all directors at the San Antonio Bible-Based Science Association. We're here to reassure you can believe the Bible from the very first verse. Today we have a special guest, Dr. Matthew Cserhati. He has been with us in our monthly meetings for several months. His parents and his family fled from Hungary during the 50s and 70s. He's now 38 years old and currently at the UT Health Science Center as a biologist and researcher. He also has acted as a translator from German to English and Hungarian. He has a PhD in biology and a Bachelor of Science in computer science from 2 separate universities in Hungary. I asked him about that because they fled Hungary, but then they went back after the wall fell in 93. He has also been at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. He's published a book, Atheism Unraveled. Welcome, Dr. Cserhati.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
What about that book? Atheism Unraveled. What's that about?
It's a book about my basic arguments against atheism. Like, for example, one of my main lines of arguments against atheism is proofs from creation science, showing that, for example, genomic-wise, we study genomes that they're way too complex for random mutations to bring about. Where I also talk like theophanies or like evidence of people actually experiencing like miracles of God, or like talking about like the first atheist state, that is communism, which really shows that atheism leads to like a totalitarian regime. But it's made up of 8 chapters, like covering my main arguments against atheism. And I wrote the book so that it would be helpful for Christians to defend their faith.
Now that kind of bridges 2 sets of interests you have. You have this background in science and computer science and genetics, but right now you're working on another degree in what?
In theology.
In theology. So it's a fascinating intertwining of those things. Let's go back to basics. Why did you become a biologist?
I became a biologist because when I was young, I was interested in studying like animals. I remember that when I first looked through a microscope at like the skin cells of an onion, I was fascinated by how cells look like on a microscopic level, and I was really interested in understanding like what makes living things alive. And so I reasoned that you can go to the level of organs or tissues or cells, but inside the cell, the genetic material itself is what is absolutely necessary for life. That if you take away genes or DNA, then cells are not functionable. That means that the organism itself cannot live. And so that's really what got me interested in studying what makes life, or what causes life in organisms.
Now, in your field of biology, most of the people in that field are evolutionists.
Yeah.
You're a weird duck in the fact that you're a creationist. Why?
Well, I think it's mainly because there's like a prevailing paradigm of evolution that you know, if you're a non-believer and they just give you this evolutionary theory, like, I mean, it's basically the only thing that's being taught in public school. So many people, simply being non-believers, they just take the bait and they believe what like the majority of scientists say, that, well, we just came from atoms, and so they just swallow the bait hook, line, and sinker. But however, I think that as a scientist, still, you always have to question authority. You have to doubt Darwin. That's why this is one of my bumper stickers. That you have to question even the scientific authority, because in science, it's not a valid answer if you say, well, just because Darwin said so, just because my professor said so, I also believe evolution. And also because I think that the natural evidence, simply points away from evolution and random mutations to God. I think that there's order in nature, and since there's order, it came from an orderly source, from an orderly mind, that you can recognize order and structuredness and sort of intelligent design in nature. We as creationists, we believe in intelligent design. It's just that we believe more about it. We're a special set of ID believers. But I think basically that nature points to God.
Let me ask you a question about your job, and how does your belief in creation, does it cause any problems with you on the job? I mean, we know that people who believe in creation have trouble, if not impossibilities, of getting into the academic world. And even NASA has been very hard on people who don't believe in evolution. And we know of cases of scientists who have been fired from NASA even.
Okay.
In the civilian sector, in where you're working right now, it's a non-academic position in the biochemistry or microbiology world at UT Health Science Center. Is that correct?
It's the cell systems and anatomy department. Well, actually, after I moved back to the United States, this is my third position. At my first position, after 2 years, my boss found out that I was a creationist, and he made me resign. So I did receive persecution.
So you paid a price for that?
I have. At my second position, my boss was more tolerant, and he knew about it, but he didn't make an issue out of it. But at my present job, it's still unknown.
You're in a closet.
Well, in a closet, but you know, this is it. You know, it's not an interview question like what is your belief on creation or evolution, and they shouldn't make it like a religious test, because I mean that wouldn't be ethical.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it even necessary to get into that discussion to do what you do?
Whether you have to believe in evolution to do secular research, it all depends on what field you're in. I mean, if you're researching biology, then there's a very high likelihood that this issue will come up. But if you're in the medical sciences, there still is a small chance, but it doesn't come up so frequently.
You are listening to Believing the Bible. This is Scott Lane with Terry Reed and Dr. Carl Williams. If you would like to learn more, go to sabsa.org. That is SABBSA.org. Today we're having a conversation with Dr. Matthew Cserhati, a biologist and geneticist. The main mantra in evangelism today, and for decades, has been Jesus only. Let's just focus on Jesus and not all this other kind of side stuff.
Okay.
Why does creation even matter in this whole discussion?
Well, I mean, if we're saying that Jesus only, we have to realize that Jesus talked about creation in numerous parts of the New Testament. So if I'm obedient to Jesus, then I'm going to believe what he says about creation. That's only logical. But let's look at another name of Jesus Christ. He is the last Adam. And this presupposes that there was a first Adam in the Garden of Eden. And the reason that we have to attach creation to the Gospel or the New Testament is simply because there's a salvation history playing out in the entire Bible. And we start in Genesis. We start with God who creates the world, with God who is the judge, God who is the lawmaker. And this is all foundational in Genesis. Then we see that God creates man in his own image. He doesn't create man in the image of an ape. So that contradicts evolution. God didn't create man as man and man, so that excludes the homosexual movement. It's very relevant for today's morality. But we see that if we take Genesis literally, we see that God says to Adam that if we eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, on that day you shall surely die. And so that is the reason sin and death and suffering all came into the world as a negative consequence of man's sin. Because the gospel is made up of the good news, but it is preceded by the bad news in the Garden of Eden. So therefore, in the first Garden of Eden, the first Adam commits sin, but the last Adam, that is Jesus Christ, in the Garden of Gethsemane, he is suffering in his soul because he knows that on the cross he will have to suffer and die for the sin of mankind. You have to attach the good news with the bad news. The fall into sin with the tree of knowledge of good and evil to the tree, that is a cross on which Jesus Christ died. I mean, they're interconnected with one another. You can't have one without the other. It's like a coin with two sides. A coin doesn't have just one side.
Your comments support one of our basic ideals, and that is that we live in a society today that doesn't have a foundation. That when Peter in Acts chapter 2 was talking to people in Jerusalem to the Jews. He just started talking about God because they already knew the Old Testament. They had a foundation. But in Acts 17, when he's talking to the Greeks, he starts with that. Now it's Paul in Acts 17. He's talking about the creation first because he wants a foundation for the God who created everything. And in our society today, we've moved so far away from the Bible that really we have to start with foundational things. We have to start with Genesis and the creation. Last time you showed us 3 copies of the Journal of Creation. In the current copy of Journal of Creation, you have a couple of articles. How are these type of research journals helpful on the creation side?
For the Christian, well, these can help and equip the average Christian who is not a biologist in that it provides reasons, arguments, and answers to atheists who question creation or who question the validity or the authority of the Scripture. So I feel that first of all, since I'm a biologist, I'm doing biological research to God's glory. But another aspect is that I just want to show that the Bible, that creation science can provide answers. It can do in-depth research. It can match what the evolutionists and what the atheists show. That if somebody comes with a question, then we can look through the scientific proofs, look through the evidence, and come up with a rational answer to any kind of scientific question or objection that an atheist may bring up.
Thank you, Dr. Cserhati. We look forward to doing another couple of programs with you in the coming weeks. Information for creation events in our area are on our website's calendar page. For more information or to schedule a presentation, go to sabsa.org or call 210-599-7240. When you go to our website, you can click on a link to our newsletter. Our website has a link for contact information on which you can order our newsletter to be emailed to you, or you can call us. Also go to whyshouldyoubelieve.com. That is Terry's website containing articles looking at current day issues from a biblical perspective. SABSA meets the second Tuesday of each month at 7 p.m. We are now meeting at Faith Lutheran Church just south of the corner of Jones-Maltzberger and Thousand Oaks. There you will find biblical apologetics and creation science teaching found nowhere else in Bexar County, as well as the availability of books and videos on these important subjects. If you miss any part of this show, you can listen to the show anytime by going to the AM 630 KSLR, the Word in South Texas website. Click on KSLR Podcast, scroll down until you find Believing the Bible. Please join us again next Saturday for Believing the Bible. I'm Scott Lane, and for Terry Reed, Dr. Carl Williams, and Ed Salzwell, thanks for listening, and we hope you found today a reason to believe the Bible.